right, we have one more thing to talk about in regard to the oscillators, which is going to bring up several different things, and that is the sync switch. So let's turn sync on. Wow, Mark, that sounds just the same. And the same speech I go through every time we talk about sync. Let's talk about sync. Sync forces one oscillator's wave shape to restart when the other oscillator's wave shape restarts. When the two oscillators are the same pitch, that means they're already having their wave shape restart at the same time. What has to happen for us to get the unique sync effect is that one oscillator has to be changed in frequency and then have its frequency reset each time the wave shape of the first oscillator or whichever oscillator is reset. So right now we're not hearing any difference, but the minute we start messing with the frequency of oscillator 2, we'll hear something. So as you can see, I am just basically swinging the frequency of oscillator 2 all over the place, and we are getting that typical sync effect sound. Now you might say, well, Mark, what if I wanted to have some sort of sync related effect without me having to sit and turn the oscillator 2 interval knob? Well, they have given you the option to do that. Even though this is extremely budget, you can switch it to contoured, and then the envelope is directed, in addition to being directed to the amp or whatever you have it set to, it's directed to the frequency of oscillator 2, resulting in a variation of the frequency of oscillator 2 based on the envelope. But one thing I found out that you have to do, if your amount is all the way down in the filter, then you won't hear anything. But the amount apparently in the filter has to be up for the envelope to be directed to the frequency of oscillator 2. Also need some cleaning there. Of course, your different envelope settings are going to make a huge difference here because the envelope settings are being directed to the frequency of oscillator 2. Of course, the square wave sounds different than the sawtooth. You can get a wide variety of sounds by doing experiments with your envelope shape. Also keep in mind that it is oscillator 2 is synced to oscillator 1, so if we turn down oscillator 2, we're not going to hear anything. And if we turn up oscillator 2 and turn down oscillator 1, we get 100% sync effect. Now, if you're me, you're saying to yourself, okay, Mark, so we haven't talked about modulation yet, and I don't want you to get ahead of yourself. I refer to myself in the third person or whatever. No, what about modulation? Since we have some, like, for example, sample and hold in the modulation, can we direct sample and hold to the sync? The answer is no. Here's why. When we turn the modulation on, the modulation affects both oscillators at the same time, which means oscillator 1 and oscillator 2 will be at the same pitch due to what the modulation is generating. And if both of them are equally affected by the modulation, then we have each iteration of their frequency being the same frequency. And if they're the same frequency, as we talked about at the beginning, they do not have the effect. So what happens is this weird thing is, for example, if we turn on sample and hold right now, it affects oscillator 1 and oscillator 2 in the same way, and we just hear the pitch change. Of course, if you turn the knob, you can kind of mess with that at least a little bit. But in general, it's going to have them at the same frequency. But let's see what happens when we switch it to contour. You can get, it's still going to affect the pitch of oscillator 2, even though the modulation is affecting them both. But what the ultimate outcome of all of this is that you can't have a solid pitch. In some synthesizers, you can direct the pitch modulation directly to the frequency of oscillator 2 without changing its pitch in the same way that you're changing the pitch of oscillator 1. Because this is sent to oscillator 1, it's always going to, you're never going to get a sample and hold sync effect because oscillator 1 is affected by it too. I hope that makes sense. Okay, but that is basically the oscillators 1 and 2 on the Moog Rogue.